students, welcome back. Hope you all had a good time in the past few days, and now it's time to get back to the classes. Welcome back to the physics video session. So this is the ninth video that we are meeting. So far we have discussed couple of chapters, and we have been discussing this chapter 11, calorimetry, for the second time. So we finished the first half. Now it's time to discuss the second half of the chapter. So what did we learn so far? So to begin with, I told you what heat is. We saw what internal energy is and what happens when you heat, what happens to the movement of the particle. So we saw heat, its SI unit, and we learned what a temperature is. Temperature is nothing but the measure of hotness or coldness of the object. And you learnt about the SI unit of temperature. So heat and temperature, their units. And you saw the difference between heat and temperature. And on the other hand, you learnt about heat capacity and specific heat capacity, differences between heat capacity and specific heat capacity. So these are the things which we saw in the previous session. So what is meant by heat capacity or specific heat capacity? What is the definition? The specific heat capacity of a substance is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of unit mass of a substance through 1 degree Celsius. So you have a unit mass, say for example 1 kg of mass, its initial temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. You have to raise that 20 degrees Celsius to 21 degrees Celsius. So in order to increase this 1 degree Celsius, it cannot happen in magic. Okay, so magic is not possible here. So we are learning science. So in order to increase the temperature, what are you supposed to give? You are supposed to give some heat energy. So with the help of heat energy, what will happen? You will increase the temperature from 20 degrees Celsius to 21 degrees Celsius. And this particular quantity of heat, the amount of heat, changes from one material to another material. So what are the topics that we are going to discuss today we'll be discussing about the specific heat capacity of few different and common substances, then about calorimeter, an interesting instrument, and where this heat capacity is found in nature. We are learning so much of theory. Is it really found around us? Is it seen around us? Yes, it is. We are going to discuss that too. And then we are going to discuss about phase change. And this latent heat is something left out for the next video session. So there is part 3 for this particular chapter. So we'll move on. I told you what is the definition for specific heat capacity. The amount of heat energy required to raise the temperature of a unit mass of substance by 1 degree Celsius. So the specific heat capacity is different for different substance. I told you that earlier. So here is the specific heat capacity in joule per gram degree Celsius and calories per gram degree Celsius. So what is the formula for specific heat capacity? C is equal to Q by MT. So Q by MT, what is the formula? Q divided by M into del T. Del T is that small change in temperature. What is the unit for Q? Q is heat. So for heat it is joule or it is calorie, and for mass it is grams, and for temperature it is degree Celsius. So the specific heat capacity is mentioned in terms of joules and calories for different substances like bismuth, gold, lead, and so on. See which has the highest specific heat capacity. Very interesting, right? Water has the highest specific heat capacity. So water becomes a very, very special element when it comes to the specific heat capacity. So water is a substance which has a very high specific heat capacity. In calories it is 1. So we'll move on to the next topic. Calorimeter. What is calorimeter? Temperature is an instrument, you know. So what does the temperature do? It measures the hotness or coldness of a substance. Okay, so here again calorimeter is also an instrument. What does this instrument do? It measures the amount of heat gained or lost. You go to a shop, or for example you are a business person and you are investing in your business, say 10 rupees. Okay, so after your business you get 12 rupees. So what is your gain? Your gain is 2 rupees. So imagine you are obtaining 7 rupees by the end of your business. Then your loss is 3 rupees. So you are able to calculate the gain and loss in terms of money. Similarly, we are going to calculate the gain and loss, the heat gained and the heat lost in a particular process. And in order to measure that loss or gain of heat, we need a calorimeter. What does a calorimeter have? It has a stirrer, it has a thermometer, and it has an insulated vessel. What do you mean by an insulator? Insulator is a non-conductor. It does not conduct heat or electricity. So when it does not conduct heat or electricity, the heat is totally trapped inside. The heat cannot escape this particular container. The heat cannot come out because this is not a conductor. So heat stays inside. Reaction mixture is something you are mixing two different elements in different temperature. For example, you are mixing water and ice. Water has a different temperature, ice has a different temperature. When you mix both, what happens? One is losing the cold. Say for example, there will be an increase in temperature and there will be a drop in temperature. When you see ice is gaining the heat from the water. So the temperature of the water goes down, the temperature of the ice goes up. One is gaining heat and the other one is losing heat. So such mixture is what you call it as a reaction mixture. So now we'll see how this calorimeter is constructed. So what happens here in a calorimeter is something that I told you. But this change in heat temperature or this exchange of heat, gain of heat or loss of heat, it depends on three factors as I told you earlier. So this exchange of heat depends upon three factors. And what are the three factors? That is the mass of the substance, the specific heat capacity of a substance, and then the difference in the temperature of the substance. Like the example I gave you earlier, you are using water and ice. You should know the mass of water and you should also know the mass of ice. The specific heat capacity of the substance. In this case, the specific heat capacity is going to be same because it is water in both the cases. Or now imagine you are going to mix ice and oil. Okay, if you are going to mix ice and oil, the specific heat capacity of oil is different and the specific heat capacity of ice is different. So you need to know the specific heat capacity of both the substances that you are going to use in the case. And then you should also know the difference in the temperature of the substance. Imagine your oil is in room temperature, that is say 20 degrees Celsius, and your ice is frozen 0 degrees Celsius. And what is the difference between them? That is 20 minus 0, that is 20 degrees Celsius. So you should know the mass of the substance. You should have a clear idea of the specific heat capacity of the substances and the temperature of the substances. So now we'll see how will a calorimeter look like. It is an instrument. We'll see how it actually looks like. So this calorimeter is a very small apparatus. It's more like that of a small box, but it has few components inside. So what are the components that are inside a calorimeter? It has a cylindrical copper container. So why do we use copper? I'll tell you why. Remember this, we are using a copper container, not a container of any other metal. And that is because it has a very, very important use. Copper has a significant character and I will tell you that. And now This copper container is kept inside a wooden box. Why are we keeping inside a wooden box? Do you remember the picture which I showed you earlier? This calorimeter is kept in an insulated container. And it's not just that, we are going to insulate this particular container even more. How are we going to insulate it? You know, there is some space between this calorimeter and the box, and this space is filled by air. We don't want air to absorb the heat. Okay, so what we are doing is we are stuffing this vacant area with all possible non-conducting substances like sawdust or glass or wool or cork or cotton or any possible non-conducting or insulating substance. Okay, so you have a copper container, you have a wooden box, and you put some insulating material all around, and you are closing it so that heat does not go out. And then you have a stirrer and a thermometer. Why do we have a stirrer? To mix so that the change in temperature happens. So this is how it is. So imagine this to be your let's consider this to be our copper container, and this is our wooden box, and this gap is being filled with insulating material. You have a stirrer and you have a thermometer, and it is closed with a lid. So what I am going to do is I am going to add water inside and see the temperature. Okay, so initially what I am doing is, I am going to add water inside. I am going to find the temperature of the water, and I am going to consider that temperature as T1. I will know the mass of the water, I know the specific heat capacity of water, and I also note the temperature of water, and I am going to mark it as T1. Now I should add another material, right? I have to bring in a change in temperature, so I am going to bring another material. So what I am doing is I am choosing some object. I should find its mass, I should know the specific heat capacity of this particular substance, and I am heating it. Why I am heating it is I am going to add two different temperature, substance of two different temperatures. So the temperature of this is T2. The temperature of mass water is T1. The temperature of this substance is T2. So what I am going to do now is I am going to put it inside and I am going to stir it well. So what will happen as we stir? There will be a change in temperature. You would have noticed the change in temperature. Initially it was less. When I put in this particular substance which is of higher temperature when compared to the water, there is a rise in temperature. How long does this rise in temperature happens? Until the temperature of this particular substance and the water becomes same. Okay, so exchange of heat happens between the water and this substance. We will consider this as an iron block. So exchange of heat happens between water and the iron block. So what type of exchange happens? One has lost heat energy and the other has gained heat energy, right? So now we have come to a place, and I am going to note down this temperature, and I am going to consider this temperature as T3 now. So I know T1 temperature of water, T2 temperature of this iron block, and T3 the final temperature after putting them both together. Who has lost heat energy? This iron block, because initially it was in high temperature. Now the temperature has come down. Who has gained heat energy? Water has gained heat energy, because initially it was of lower temperature. After putting in this hot body, it has gained the heat. So one person has lost heat energy and the other person has gained the heat energy. So we are going to bring in some mathematics now. That heat lost is equal to heat gained. Okay, what is it? Heat lost is equal to heat gained, and this is called as the principle of method of mixtures or principle of calorimetry. It's very important, children. What is the principle of calorimetry? Heat lost is equal to heat gained. So here M1C1. So this belongs to water. Okay, so M1C1 into T2 minus T3, that is the initial temperature of the iron, and then the final temperature is equal to M2C2, that is for iron, mass of the iron, specific heat capacity of the iron. T3 is the final temperature and T1 is the initial temperature of the water. Okay, so Heat lost is equal to heat gained. Okay, one is losing heat energy and the other one is gaining the heat energy. Heat lost is equal to heat gained. So heat lost by one body is equal to the heat gained by the other body, and that is what this mathematic expression explains. Hope it's very clear for you. So just remember one thing. Heat lost by a hot body is equal to the heat gained by the cold body. So heat lost by the hot body is equal to heat gained by the cold body. And this is called the principle of mixture, or principle of method of mixture, or principle of calorimetry. And this particular principle is based upon the law of conservation of energy. What does the law of conservation of energy say? Energy is neither lost nor gained, but it is transformed from one form to another form. Okay, fine. So we'll move on to the next interesting topic, natural phenomenon and specific heat capacity. Like I told you, we've learned so much about specific heat capacity. So learning so much about it, where is it practically applied in our life? Which element had the highest specific heat capacity, children? Exactly, that's water. It's about 5 times as that of sand. So water has higher specific heat capacity when compared to sand. So the heat energy needed to raise the temperature of a certain amount of water is nearly 5 times than that of the heat required to raise the temperature of sand. Imagine I have 1 kg of sand and 1 kg of water. I need a quantity called X amount of heat to raise the temperature of sand. But I need a quantity of 5x heat to raise the temperature of water. So water needs more heat energy to get heated, but sand needs less heat energy to get heated. That's what specific heat capacity is all about. Okay, if something has high specific heat capacity, it means that it needs lot of heat energy to get heated up. With an object with a low specific heat capacity means it needs only a less amount of heat energy to heat it up. I'll give you a very simple example. Imagine you and your friend, and somebody comes in and a teacher comes into your classroom and scolds you both so much. Okay, your friend, he is very short tempered, he got very angry and he got very upset, but you're a very cool person, you are least bothered. Okay, so what happens? You cannot be I cannot make you angry very easily, but I can make your friend upset very easily, which means you have a very high capacity. Okay, you are very tolerant, but your friend is very feeble, he can be broken very easily. Similarly, water needs lot of heat energy to raise the temperature, whereas sand needs less heat energy to raise the temperature. So sand gets heated or cooled very easily. Water needs lot of heat energy to get heated, and it takes lot of time to get cooled. So where have you heard this water and sand? Where do you see them together? In the beach. You would have learnt about land breeze and sea breeze. These breezes make the climate near the seashore very pleasant. Sometimes it's very hot and sometimes it's very cold. Imagine when you go around like 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock, by that time if you try to walk in the seashore, in the beach, it's very difficult because the sand will be very hot. But when you go put your legs into the water is pretty cold, right? It is the same sun that is trying to heat the sand and the water. But who is hot? Sand is hot because the sand can get heated very easily. But you cannot heat water so easily. Okay. Similarly, sand can also be cooled easily. When you go to the same beach around 3 o'clock, the sand is very pleasant to walk on. It's little warm, and after 4 or 5 it gets cold, and around some 6 or 7 it becomes really nice and cold. And the other examples that are given in your book is hot water bottles are used for fermentation. That is, water does not cool very quickly, as I told you. So hot water bottle provides it could stay hot for a very long time. Hot water bags, right? You know what a hot water bag is. For people who have neck pain or leg pain, they'll pour hot water in a bag and keep it on the place where they feel the pain. Why do we use water? Why are we not using sand? Because sand will get cold very easily. Water will take long time to lose its temperature. And water is also called as an effective coolant. Don't forget, water has very high specific heat capacity, so it's difficult to heat it and it is difficult to cool it. Okay, so it is used as a coolant. What do you mean by coolant? Imagine you are using a laptop. You are keeping your laptop on your lap. After some 10 or 15 minutes, you will feel the temperature, the rise in temperature in your lap. That's because of the laptop. Now imagine you putting water bag in your thighs and then keep your laptop over this water bag. Now what happens is you will not feel this hot even if you are using a laptop for around 4 or 5 hours, because this water is cold. You cannot heat it very easily, right? And similarly, this specific heat capacity is applicable in the case of agriculture and various other processes. So, high and low heat capacity. You would have noticed all these three in your life. In the case of a cooking pan, I don't know how many of you have noticed this. You better go to the kitchen right now and see. Most of the cooking pans will have a thick bottom. And why is that thick bottom? Yeah, so that your cooking pan, it will get heated little late, but then the heat will be stored and the food will get cooked very quickly. And also in the case of a iron box, the base of the iron box will be very thick. Why is it thick? Because the heat will be there for a longer duration, for a long time. Even after switching off your iron box, you will not touch it immediately. You will not touch the base immediately because it will be very hot. Now coming to the very important thing. Why did we use copper in calorimeter? Why did we use this copper metal to make this calorimeter container? That's because the reason is copper has a very low specific heat capacity. So it takes, I'm pouring inside hot water. Okay, I'm surrounding this with the insulator. I'm putting it in an insulator box. But then this is a conductor, right? So this will take some heat energy. Since it has very low specific heat capacity, it takes a very little amount of heat from the substance. If I am pouring hot water, okay, I am pouring hot water into it, but what will happen is this copper container will take very small amount of hotness from the water. It will not take much. Imagine I have a bag full of chocolates. You are taking half a chocolate from my bag. Does it change anything? No, I have 100, say I have 200 chocolates and you are taking only half, but still I have 199 and a half chocolates. So you taking that half does not bring any change in the amount of chocolates I have. So similarly, copper takes out very less amount of heat, or it absorbs less amount of heat because of the low specific heat capacity of this copper metal. We are using it in the calorimeter. Okay, now we will move on to a very interesting topic. This is something which you have learnt in your 6th standard or 7th standard. Melting, freezing, vaporization, condensation and sublimation. What is all these? Changing from one state to another state. So you would have learnt it in your 6th standard or even in your 4th or 5th standard. There are 3 states of matter. What are the 3 states? Solid, liquid and gas. And you can transform certain materials from one state to another state. One very good example is water. When it is frozen, it is in the form of a solid, and when it melts, it is in the form of a liquid. When you heat it, it goes to the form of a gas, that is steam. So these are certain things, and the last thing is don't remember this as deposition. Remember this as solidification. Solidification is turning gas into solid. You call it as solidification. So you know what is melting, you know what is freezing, you know vaporization, condensation. You know condensation, right? When steam becomes liquid again, water again, you call it as condensation. Sublimation, where do we see sublimation? Example is camphor. So all this process is possible. When is all this possible? Only when you have heat. Without heat, do you think it's possible? No. You need to apply some heat for this process to happen, or you have to remove the heat for the process to happen. See, for example, you have a solid, you add heat, it becomes a liquid. You add heat, it becomes a gas. When you remove the heat, it becomes a liquid again. When you remove the heat, it goes back to its solid state. So you can change the phase of a substance from a solid or to liquid, or liquid to gas, or solid to gas, or gas to solid, simply by adding or removing the heat energy. So the process of change from one state to other state happens because of adding or removing heat. Okay, I am telling you again, the process of changing from one state to another state happens by adding or removing heat, right? But see here in this definition which is written above, you read it aloud to yourself. The process of change from one state to another at a constant temperature is called as the change of phase. I'm adding or removing heat. When I add or remove heat, what is supposed to happen? There has to be a change in temperature. But what does this definition say? Though I add or remove heat, the temperature is going to be constant. Is it magic? What happens to the heat? You have a piggy bank. You know what a piggy bank is, right? Where you store your coins, savings. So you keep on adding coins. Okay, every day you put one coin inside. So you expect this piggy bank to be full. But when you open one day it's empty. Is it possible to happen? No. When you put something there, it has to be there. Just few minutes ago we learned that law of conservation of energy. Energy is neither lost or gained. So here, though there is a increase or decrease in heat supplied, the temperature remains constant. What actually happens here? What happens here is, we are going to learn it now. We'll start with melting and freezing. What is melting? When a substance changes its phase from solid to liquid by the absorption of heat at a constant temperature, it is called as melting. Whereas what does freezing mean? It is simply the reverse of melting. Here it turns from solid to liquid, and here it turns liquid to solid. So it's simply the reverse of melting. But what actually happens here is, here the liberation of heat happens. Here absorption of heat, liberation. What do you mean by absorption? Absorption is taking in. Liberation is giving out. Okay. Taking in is absorption, giving out is liberation. So absorption of heat happens here in melting. Liberation of heat happens in freezing, but the temperature is constant in both the cases. What actually happens to the heat? The heat is absorbed during melting, heat is rejected during the freezing, but the temperature remains constant. Okay, we'll see, or we'll try to understand this concept with the help of a small experiment. Okay, so for this experiment I am taking a cup full of ice. So when it is ice, what would be the temperature initially? It will be 0 degree Celsius. Okay, the initial temperature is 0 degree Celsius. Now what I am going to do is I am going to heat it. So what will happen as I heat? As I heat, the temperature will Okay, we expect the temperature to increase, but the temperature remains in 0 degrees Celsius. So we are going to plot it in the form of a graph. In the x-axis I am going to take time. Time will be in seconds. In y-axis I am going to take temperature in degree Celsius. So we'll start here. Initially the temperature is 0 degree because it is ice. After 5 seconds or after 1 minute again it is in 0 degree. After 2 minutes again 0 degree. After 3 minutes again 0 degree. For 4 minutes it remains in 0 degrees and it does not change. And after 4 minutes the temperature starts increasing from 0 degree to say 6 degrees. Okay, it becomes 0 to 6. It slowly increases and it goes to 6 degrees Celsius. I have been supplying heat all along for this 4 minutes. For the 4 minutes, this particular huge cup of ice is on fire. But the temperature was 0 degree. I am repeating it again. Try to understand. You have a cup of ice. The temperature was 0 degree. I start heating it and I have been heating it for 4 minutes. For 4 minutes, the temperature was 0 degrees. But after 4 minutes the temperature started increasing and it went to some 6 degrees or you can also call it a 16 degrees or something. It starts increasing. Okay, we'll call this as 16 degrees. Okay, it goes to 16 degrees. So what was happening here? How is this heat? This heat I have been giving for the 4 minutes. What actually does? There is something called work. So, the heat that you have been supplying is used in melting the ice. So, certain work is being done. Okay. So, work is done. So, your energy is not wasted. The heat energy that you gave was turned into a work. What kind of work? The process of melting the ice. So, once the ice is melted, then the temperature starts to increase. So, here is the actual graph. So I am heating it for 120 seconds. It remains what? At 0 degrees and then it gradually increases to 30 degrees. So for these 120 seconds, where did the heat that I supplied go? The heat that I supplied was used to melt the ice. Certain work is being done. So this is one thing in melting process which you are not aware of. You have learned something new about melting. You know what melting is? Solid to liquid when you heat. But what happens? The temperature remains constant for a long time and then increases. Why does the temperature? You keep on heating but the temperature is constant. Why? Because that heat is used for the process of melting. So what are the other effects? Change in volume on melting. What will happen when you melt? You have cup of ice and you melt it. So will the volume change? Of course yes, the volume changes. And it's very interesting that for few substances they expand during melting. That is their volume increases. Few substances they contract during melting, that is their volume decreases. Okay, so for few while melting, for few the volume increases and for few the volume decreases. We'll see who is going to increase the volume. For substances like lead and wax, they expand on melting, that is the volume will increase, the volume increase on melting. But substance like ice, the volume decrease on melting. This is something you all would have done or you can even try doing it again. Take a glass of water, put it inside the freezer and see what will happen. Your water would have spilled down. So now next time take half a cup of water and put it in the freezer. When it is frozen, the quantity of water is more. You will have more than half tumbler of ice. What happened here? The volume has increased while freezing. Okay, now take the same cup of water and keep it on the table. Leave it there for 4 or 5 hours. Now go and see. It comes back to half tumbler. Earlier it was more than half when it was in the form of ice. Now it is only half. So the volume has decreased. So few the volume will decrease and few the volume will increase. So the volume change and melting have an impact on each other. The next one is pressure. What will happen in pressure? See, when I told you about ice, the volume will increase on melting. Sorry. The volume will decrease on melting. For ice, the volume will decrease on melting. So, and for wax, the volume will increase on melting. So, just remember that. So, for those substance whose volume will decrease, the melting point is directly proportional to the pressure. So, when the pressure is increased, melting point will also increase. But for those substance whose volume will increase in melting, like wax, the melting point is inversely proportional to pressure. When the pressure decreases, the melting point will increase, or when the pressure increases, the melting point will decrease. So here it is inversely proportional. Sorry, here it is directly proportional. For whom? For ice. What happens in ice? When it melts, the volume decreases. For that, the melting point is directly proportional to pressure. When the volume increases on melting, the melting point is inversely proportional to pressure. So there is something called impurities. For example, imagine you are adding salt to ice cube. When you are adding salt to ice cube, what will happen to the ice? It will not get melted very easily. So what happens? The melting point changes. So by adding impurities, you can change the melting point. So the melting point decreases due to the presence of impurities. So we'll stop here. We've learned only melting now. So what are the topics that we discussed today are? So we started with substances with different specific heat capacity, and water had the maximum specific heat capacity. And we also know that copper has less specific heat capacity, and that is why we are using copper in calorimeter. And we saw how a calorimeter is constructed. And we saw the principle of calorimetry, that is heat lost by a hot body is equal to heat gained by the cold body, and we also saw the formula for it. And we saw few natural phenomena and consequences of specific heat capacity of water. And then we learnt about change in phase. You apply heat, but the temperature does not change, but the state of matter changes. So what happens to the heat you supply? It helps or it is used for the change in phase. So we learnt about melting and the effect of volume the change in volume and the effect of pressure and impurities in the melting process. So now children, so we have not yet completed this chapter. You will have one more video session for this particular chapter. So in the meantime, I want you to go through this video again and again. I'll post study materials for this particular chapter. I want you all to download the study material, read those questions and answers, and try to have a better understanding of the chapter. And I appreciate all those who are submitting your assignments online, and those who don't submit your assignment online, I'm sorry that you will be it is you who's losing your opportunities for better understanding and better learning. So I want you all to use it well. Don't waste your time. Obey your parents. Be good and take care. Thank you, children.